My son got married and never told me. I saw it on Instagram, him in a suit next to his wife in a white dress. I didn't say anything. The next day I sold the house he lived in. That was my way of making a toast. If this story is breaking your heart, subscribe. Every day there's a story that could be yours. Tell us where you're listening from. 3 oldies in the morning. The cell phone vibrated on the nightstand and woke me up. It wasn't a call, just one of those notifications I don't really understand. I grabbed the device with my right hand, the one that still aches ever since a steel beam fell on it 20 years ago, and I looked at the screen with half-closed eyes. Instagram. My neighbor Pat had installed that thing for me 2 months ago. "Walt, this way you can see everyone's photos," she told me, patiently teaching me how to tap the little buttons. I asked her what for if nobody posts photos of me. She laughed. "Walt, it's so you can see everyone else's." I opened it without much thought, just because I couldn't get back to sleep and the house was too quiet. The first photo I saw was of my son, Danny, my only son. He was in a navy blue suit, elegant, with a gray tie, and his hair combed back with gel. I just stared at that image like an idiot, not understanding when he had bought that suit. Why was he so dressed up? He never dressed like that. Well, he never dressed like that for me. I tapped the screen and more photos appeared. In the second one, he was hugging a woman dressed in white, a long dress with lace on the shoulders, a bouquet of white roses in her hands, and Danny was looking at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I blinked 3 times in a row. 4. 5. As if blinking would wake me up from this nightmare. My name is Walter Sullivan. I'm 67 years old. And right at this moment, I'm looking at my son's wedding photo without understanding how I got here. I swiped to the next photo. There were the in-laws. A guy in his 60s, expensive gray suit, a toothpaste ad smile, a woman in a pink dress, pearl necklace, expensive salon hairdo. Both of them hugging my son. Both smiling as if they had just won the lottery. And in the middle, Danny, happy, beaming with his arms around them. I brought my face closer to the phone, looking for myself. Looking for myself in some corner of that photo, in some reflection. Nothing. I swiped to the next one, a toast, champagne glasses raised, people laughing, a huge hall with golden lights and white flowers hanging from the ceiling. How lovely, how elegant, how perfect it all was. I looked at the post date. Yesterday at 7:47 p.m., I looked up at the wall clock in my room, 3:22 a.m. I did the math in my head slowly because the numbers don't come as fast as they used to. 8 hours. 8 hours ago, my son had gotten married. 8 hours ago, he had promised eternal love. 8 hours ago, he had toasted with champagne and cut a cake and danced the waltz. And I was here in my 1-bedroom apartment, sleeping on a mattress, with a dip in the middle from so much use. Knowing nothing, without a call, without an invitation, without a dad, I'm getting married on Saturday. Nothing. I went back to the photos. I looked at all of them one by one. There were about 30 images. The decorated hall, the main table with white linens and huge flower centerpieces, the couple cutting the cake, the guests dancing, Danny lifting his wife in his arms while everyone clapped. I zoomed in on each photo with trembling fingers, looking for myself, looking for my face at some table in the back, looking for even my shadow, but I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere. Not in any photo, not at any moment. It was as if I didn't exist. As if the 35 years I spent raising that man had been a dream. As if I were invisible. I scrolled down to the comments. There were hundreds. Congratulations. What a beautiful couple. The in-laws look so happy. That last comment stabbed me in the chest. The in-laws? Yes, they were happy. They were right there front row hugging him, toasting with him. And I, his father, the one who gave him life, the one who worked for 35 years in construction so he'd have a plate of food on the table, the one who served 2 years in Vietnam so this country would be free for him to live in. I didn't even deserve a mention. I kept scrolling. So lucky to have a family like that, said another. A family like that. A family where I didn't fit. A family that included them but excluded me. I sat perfectly still, phone in my hands, feeling something break inside me. But it wasn't pain, not yet. It was confusion. It was shock. It was the feeling of being wide awake in the middle of a nightmare you can't escape. I looked at the date again. Yesterday. which means less than 24 hours ago, my son was organizing this. Less than a week ago, he was trying on that suit. Less than a month ago, he was sending out invitations. And at no point in all those days, weeks, months of preparation, at no point did it cross his mind to call his father and say, "Dad, I'm getting married." I took a deep breath and put the phone face down on the table. But 5 seconds later, I grabbed it again. I went back to the photos. I looked at them again, all of them again, as if I needed to confirm they were real, that I wasn't hallucinating, that my son had truly gotten married without telling me. I zoomed in on the toast photo. I counted the tables. 8 tables, 10 people per table. 80 guests. 80 people who did deserve to be there. 80 people who knew about the wedding before I did. Danny's coworkers, the bride's friends, the uncles, the cousins, the neighbors, everyone except me. I have a small apartment here in the Riverside Heights neighborhood, with a kitchen I barely use because why cook if I eat alone, and a living room with an old armchair where I spend my afternoons watching TV without really seeing it. I've been a widower for 5 years, since my wife Sarah died of cancer. My son showed up 3 times during the year and a half she was in. Agony. I worked for 35 years in construction until my body just gave out. Before that, I served my country in Vietnam from 1971 to 1973. Came back when I was 19, married Sarah when I was 21, and worked every day after that to build something for my family. And I have a son. A son who got married last night without telling me. A son who erased me from his life as if I were a stain that needed to be hidden. A son who taught me that it doesn't matter how much you give. If the other person decides you're worthless, you are worthless. I left the phone on the table and sat on the bed, my back against the cold wall. I didn't cry, not yet. I just sat there in the dark with my eyes open, staring at nothing. Outside, I could hear the distant bark of a dog, the engine of a passing car, the heavy silence of 3 hours in the morning when the world is asleep and you're the only one awake with your pain. I thought about calling him, grabbing the phone, dialing his number, waiting for him to pick up and ask him, "Why, son? Why did you do this to me?" But I didn't because deep down, I already knew the answer. Because he didn't want me there anymore. I didn't cry that night. My eyes burned. Yes. My throat closed up. Yes. But the tears didn't come. Maybe I didn't have any left. Maybe I used them all up, crying alone in the hospital while my wife was dying and my son wasn't answering his phone. Or maybe the pain was just too big to fit into tears. It was bigger than that. It was an emptiness, a huge hole in my chest where a son used to be. I didn't cry that night, but something inside me, something that had kept me standing all these years, that night, it died. And when the sun came up at 6 in the morning, I was no longer the same man. My wife Sarah died on a Tuesday in April at 4:37 in the afternoon. I was holding her hand when she stopped breathing. A hand that was once strong, that cooked, that sewed, that caressed my face when I came home tired from work. That hand slowly grew cold, and I kept holding it for another half hour because I didn't want to let go, because letting go of that hand meant accepting that Sarah was gone. The cancer took her in a year and a half of agony, chemotherapies that didn't work, pain that no morphine could dull. And I was there every day sleeping in a chair next to her hospital bed because I wasn't going to let her die alone. Danny arrived that day at 5:30, an hour late. He walked in smelling like his office, his suit wrinkled from hurrying. "Sorry, Dad. There was a lot of traffic." Sarah had been asking for him for 3 days straight. "Where's Danny?" She'd ask me with her weak voice every time she opened her eyes. I would lie to her. "He's on his way, honey. He's coming." But he wasn't coming. I'd call him and it would go to voicemail. I'd send him texts. "Your mom is asking for you." And he'd reply hours later. "I'm on my way, Dad. I just have an important meeting at work. An important meeting. More important than saying goodbye to your mother who is dying." When he finally arrived that Tuesday, she was no longer conscious. She couldn't speak. She couldn't look at him. Danny knelt by the bed, touched her forehead, and cried for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Then he hugged me, said, "I'm so sorry, Dad," and left. He had things to do. I worked 35 years in construction. I started at 20, right after I got back from Vietnam in 1973. Fresh from the jungle, knowing how to follow orders and work hard. "Kid, grab those steel beams and take them to the 3rd floor," they'd tell me. And I'd go up under the sun that burns your skin in summer, under the freezing rain in winter, without the fancy safety gear they have now, because there was no money for that stuff back then, with nothing but my back, my arms, and the need to bring food home. I finished at 55 when my knees couldn't take it anymore, and my back hurt so much that some days I'd wake up and couldn't get out of bed. 35 years carrying steel, mixing cement, putting up walls, and all that sacrifice had only one name. Danny, look at these hands. Seriously, look at them. They're covered in scars. This index finger is crooked because a crane cable snapped while I was guiding a load. This callus here on my palm is from holding a jackhammer for so long. These deep lines are from 35 years of hard labor. These hands never signed a big check, never held a college degree, never touched anything delicate. They just worked. They just gave. They just built the life that Danny has now. Every time he sits at his office desk with air conditioning, hot coffee, and clean hands, he should remember these broken hands that paid for that life. When Danny was 7, he came home from school crying because the other kids were making fun of him. "I don't have sneakers like them, Dad," he told me, his face red with shame. The sneakers he had were from a discount bin, 2 sizes too big so they'd last, with the logo peeling off. I looked at him with a broken heart and said, "Tomorrow, you'll have new sneakers." That night, I worked a double shift. I got home at 2:50 in the morning, my body destroyed. And the next day, I took him to the shoe store and bought him the sneakers he wanted, the white Nikes with the black stripe. They cost me half my paycheck. But when I saw his happy face, when I saw him running in those sneakers, I knew it was worth it. Worth every extra hour, every backache, every penny. I saved for 20 years to buy the house. 20 years putting money in a coffee can I kept hidden in the closet. Every month I'd put in what I could. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $100. There were months I could only put in $50 because Danny needed school supplies or clothes or money for a field trip. But I always put in something, always. While my coworkers bought cars, I kept riding my old Ford pickup. While others went on vacation to the coast, I stayed behind and worked overtime. "Not going anywhere this summer, Walt?" they'd ask. "No, not this year," I'd answer. But the truth is, I never went anywhere, because every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar closer to that house. When I finally had the money in 2009, I went to the bank and took it all out in cash. I remember that day perfectly. The teller looked at me funny when I told him I wanted it all in bills. "That's a lot of cash, sir," he warned. "I don't care," I said. I stuffed it all into an old duffel bag, the same one I'd carried in Vietnam, and walked to the real estate office, hugging that bag like it was a baby. The agent showed me the house in the Maple Grove suburb. It was small, 3 bedrooms with a yard the size of a dinner table. The walls needed paint. The bathroom had a leak. The kitchen had broken tiles. But it was solid. Good bones, as they say. "Do you want it?" he asked. I looked at that house and I saw Danny living there safe, with his own roof. "Yes," I said. "I want it." And right there, I emptied the duffel bag onto his desk. The guy counted the bills for half an hour, $85,000 in cash. And when he finished, he gave me the keys. Danny was 20 when I gave him the house. He had just started college, which I was paying for with overtime and weekend work. He was living in a cramped dorm room, sharing space with 3 other guys. I was living in a smaller, cheaper apartment, enough for just me. One day I called him and told him to come over. When he arrived, I already had the keys on the kitchen table. "Sit down," I told him. He sat looking confused. I pushed the keys toward him. "What's this, Dad?" he asked. "Your house," I said. "I bought a house with my savings, and it's for you. So, you never have to suffer like I did, so you never have to pay rent or live in fear of being evicted. This house is yours, son." He was quiet, just staring at the keys, and then he looked at me, and he cried. That hug was real. I swear on my life. I felt it. He hugged me tight like he hadn't hugged me since he was a little boy. I felt his arms around me. I felt his shaky breath on my shoulder. I felt his tears wetting my shirt. "Thank you, old man," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you for this. It's the biggest thing anyone has ever done for me." I put my hand on his head like I used to when he had nightmares, and I told him, "You don't have to thank me for anything, son. Just be happy and remember your old man every once in a while." He pulled away, looked me in the eyes, and told me something I'll never forget. "I'll never let you down, Dad. I promise. Never." I remember that promise every night when I go to bed alone. I hear it in his voice. I'll never let you down, Dad. But he already has. I never legally transferred the house. I gave him the keys. I said, "It's yours." And he moved in with all his stuff, but the papers, the deed, the title of ownership, everything stayed in my name. It wasn't planned, I just never did it. The process was expensive, complicated. You had to go to a notary, pay taxes, and I thought, it's all for him anyway. When I die, it'll be his. Why waste money on papers? Besides, deep down, I like knowing it was still mine, that I still had something, because after giving him my entire life, that house was the only proof that I had existed, that I had done something, that I had been a good father. That hug, the day I gave him the keys, was the last time my son touched me with love. The last time I felt like I truly mattered to him. The last time I was his father, and not just some awkward old man he had to greet out of obligation. After that, everything changed. Slowly, but it changed. The visits got shorter, the calls became more spaced out, the excuses became more frequent. I can't, Dad. I have work. I can't. I have plans. I can't. I'm busy. And I became smaller and smaller in his life, more and more invisible, until I disappeared completely from his wedding photos. 2 years ago, Danny called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was washing my lunch dishes, alone as always, when the phone rang. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," he said, with a voice I hadn't heard in months. He sounded happy, excited. "I met a girl. Her name is Madison, and I want you to meet her." My heart skipped a beat. My son, my Danny, had finally found someone. "Of course, son. Whenever you want, bring her to the house. I'll make us a barbecue." There was a short silence on the other end. "Let's go to a restaurant instead, Dad. It's quieter." I didn't understand why a restaurant was quieter than my house, but I said yes. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a steakhouse downtown, one I'd never set foot in because a meal there cost what I spent on food for a week. I got there 30 minutes early. I wore my best shirt, the light blue one Sarah had given me years ago, the one I barely wore so it wouldn't wear out. I combed my hair with gel. I cleaned my hands thoroughly, although the scars and calluses never go away, no matter how much you scrub. I sat at a table in the back and waited, nervous as a teenager. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted this girl to see me and think, Danny is so lucky to have a father like this. When I saw them walk in, I stood up immediately. Danny was in a nice suit and she was beautiful. Long brown hair, expensive clothes, a designer handbag. She walked with her back straight, head high, as if she owned the world. I approached them with a huge smile. "Madison, what a pleasure to meet you. Danny has told me so much about you." She looked me up and down. It wasn't a quick glance. It was slow, deliberate. Her eyes stopped on my light blue shirt, which was already a bit faded. They moved down to my hands, to the scars, to the calluses, to the fingernails that are never completely clean, no matter how hard you scrub. Then her eyes moved up to my face, and she held my gaze with a coldness that chilled my blood. "Nice to meet you," she said, without smiling, without offering her hand. Her hands just hung at her sides, as if touching me might infect her with something. I lowered the hand I had extended to, shake hers, and shoved both my hands into my pockets, ashamed. Danny cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, let's sit down." We sat. I ordered a simple steak. They ordered some fancy cuts with French names that I didn't understand. During that whole meal, Madison barely spoke to me. When I asked her a question, she'd answer with one-word responses, looking at Danny as if waiting for him to translate. "What do you do for a living, Madison?" "Business." "Oh, that's nice. What company do you work for?" "My father's." "And how is your family?" "Fine." Silence. Danny filled the silences by talking about anything. Work, the weather, a show they were watching. I nodded, I smiled. I tried to seem interesting, but I felt invisible, like I wasn't really there. When we finished our meals, I offered to pay. "No, Dad." "I'll get it," Danny said quickly, almost snatching the check from my hands. Madison looked at him with approval, as if telling him, "Good boy." My son secretly got married. Part 4. I put my hand on his head like I used to when he had nightmares, and I told him, "You don't have to thank me for anything, son. Just be happy and remember your old man every once in a while." He pulled away, looked me in the eyes, and told me something I'll never forget. "I'll never let you down, Dad. I promise. Never." I remember that promise every night when I go to bed alone. I hear it in his voice. I'll never let you down, Dad. But he already has. I never legally transferred the house. I gave him the keys. I said, "It's yours." And he moved in with all his stuff, but the papers, the deed, the title of ownership, everything stayed in my name. It wasn't planned, I just never did it. The process was expensive, complicated. You had to go to a notary, pay taxes, and I thought, it's all for him anyway. When I die, it'll be his. Why waste money on papers? Besides, deep down, I like knowing it was still mine, that I still had something. Because after giving him my entire life, that house was the only proof that I had existed, that I had done something, that I had been a good father. That hug, the day I gave him the keys, was the last time my son touched me with love. The last time I felt like I truly mattered to him. The last time I was his father, and not just some awkward old man he had to greet out of obligation. After that, everything changed, slowly. But it changed. The visits got shorter. The calls became more spaced out. The excuses became more frequent. I can't, Dad. I have work. I can't. I have plans. I can't. I'm busy. And I became smaller and smaller in his life, more and more invisible, until I disappeared completely from his wedding photos. 2 years ago, Danny called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was washing my lunch dishes alone as always when the phone rang. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," he said with a voice I hadn't heard in months. He sounded happy, excited. "I met a girl. Her name is Madison, and I want you to meet her." My heart skipped a beat. My son, my Danny, had finally found someone. "Of course, son. Whenever you want, bring her to the house. I'll make us a barbecue." There was a short silence on the other end. "Let's go to a restaurant instead, Dad. It's quieter." I didn't understand why a restaurant was quieter than my house, but I said yes. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a steakhouse downtown, one I'd never set foot in, because a meal there cost what I spent on food for a week. I got there 30 minutes early. I wore my best shirt, the light blue one Sarah had given me years ago, the one I barely wore so it wouldn't wear out. I combed my hair with gel. I cleaned my hands thoroughly, although the scars and calluses never go away, no matter how much you scrub. I sat at a table in the back and waited, nervous as a teenager. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted this girl to see me and think, Danny is so lucky to have a father like this. When I saw them walk in, I stood up immediately. Danny was in a nice suit and she was beautiful. Long brown hair, expensive clothes, a designer handbag. She walked with her back straight, head high, as if she owned the world. I approached them with a huge smile. "Madison, what a pleasure to meet you. Danny has told me so much about you." She looked me up and down. It wasn't a quick glance. It was slow, deliberate. Her eyes stopped on my light blue shirt, which was already a bit faded. They moved down to my hands, to the scars, to the calluses, to the fingernails that are never completely clean no matter how hard you scrub. Then her eyes moved up to my face, and she held my gaze with a coldness that chilled my blood. "Nice to meet you," she said, without smiling, without offering her hand. Her hands just hung at her sides as if touching me might infect her with something. I lowered the hand I had extended to shake hers and shoved both my hands into my pockets, ashamed. Danny cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, let's sit down." We sat. I ordered a simple steak. They ordered some fancy cuts with French names that I didn't understand. During that whole meal, Madison barely spoke to me. When I asked her a question, she'd answer with one-word responses, looking at Danny as if waiting for him to translate. "What do you do for a living, Madison?" "Business? Oh, that's nice." "What company do you work for?" "My father's." "And how is your family?" "Fine." Silence. Danny filled the silences by talking about anything. Work, the weather, a show they were watching. I nodded. I smiled. I tried to seem interesting, but I felt invisible, like I wasn't really there. When we finished our meals, I offered to pay. "No, Dad?" "I'll get it," Danny said quickly, almost snatching the check from my hands. Madison looked at him with approval, as if telling him, "Good boy." From that day on, something changed. Danny's visits became shorter, more spaced out. Before, he'd come on Sundays and stay all afternoon. We'd drink coffee, watch football, just talk. After meeting Madison, he'd come for an hour, 2, at most, and he was always checking his watch. "Sorry, Dad, I have to go. Madison's waiting for me." At first I didn't say anything. I understood he was in love, that he wanted to spend time with her. But slowly I started to realize it wasn't just that. It was that she didn't want him to be with me. It was that every minute Danny spent with me was a minute she'd hold against him later. One day, I got up the nerve to ask about her. "How's Madison, son? When do I get to see her again?" Danny changed the subject instantly. "She's fine, Dad. Hey, did I tell you about that project at work?" Then I started noticing other things. When I'd call him, he'd answer in a low voice, in whispers. "Dad, I'm with Madison. Can I call you later?" But he never called later. When I'd send him texts, it took him hours to reply. And when he did, it was a short, dry sentence. "Okay, Dad. We'll talk later. Can't now." One afternoon, I invited him for lunch. I had cooked his favorite meal, pot roast and mashed potatoes, just like his mom used to make. I bought the meat from the neighborhood butcher. I slow-cooked it for hours. I made homemade mashed potatoes with butter and milk. I set the table nicely with the tablecloth we used for special occasions. I called him excited. "Son, I made pot roast. Are you coming for lunch?" Silence on the other end. "I can't, Dad. Madison wants us to have lunch with her family." I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking at the set table, the roast still warm in the pot. "And what about me?" I asked, and my voice came out weaker than I wanted. "Am I not family?" Another silence, longer, heavier. "Another day, old man," he finally said, and he hung up. I sat down at the table and looked at the pot roast, the steaming mashed potatoes, the glass of ice water, all prepared to share with my son. But my son wasn't there. My son was having lunch with her family, with the in-laws who hugged him and treated him like their own son. I picked up the fork and cut a piece of roast. It was good. Sarah used to make it just like this, but it tasted like nothing. I ate alone in silence, listening to the sound of the silverware against the plate. And for the first time in 2 years, ever since Danny met Madison, I allowed myself to think something that scared me. My son was pulling away. And it wasn't by accident. It was on purpose. The following weeks were more of the same. Calls getting shorter, visits getting rarer. And when he did come, when he finally showed up at my apartment, he wasn't the same. He didn't relax. He didn't take his shoes off. He didn't sprawl on the couch like before. He'd stand near the door as if he were in a hurry to leave. We'd talk about trivial things, the weather, work, nothing important. And I was dying to ask him, "What happened to us, son? What did I do wrong?" But I didn't have the courage because I was afraid of the answer. Because deep down, I already knew. I didn't fit into his new life. I, with my worker's hands and my faded shirt and my small apartment, I wasn't the kind of father he wanted to show off to Madison. One Sunday, he called to tell me he couldn't come. "I have a commitment with Madison's family, Dad. We'll see each other another day." I gripped the phone tightly. "And when is another day going to be, Danny? It's been a month since you've come by." He sighed as if I were bothering him. "Dad, don't start. I'm busy. I have a life." "I know, son. I just want to see you. I just want to spend some time with you." Another sigh. "I promise I'll come next week. I have to go now." He hung up. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling something break inside me. The next week, he didn't come. Nor the week after, or the week after that. I still didn't understand, or maybe I didn't want to. But she had already decided that I didn't fit, that I wasn't the kind of father-in-law she wanted, that my worker's hands and my way of talking and my simple life were an embarrassment. And slowly, without me realizing it, she was erasing me from my son's life. Not with yelling, not with demands, but with silences, with made-up commitments, with lunches with her family that left mine out. And Danny let her. He let her erase me. Because that was easier than defending me. Danny's 32nd birthday fell on a Saturday in October. I woke up early that day with one idea stuck in my head. I was going to make him the chocolate cake he loved as a kid. The one Sarah made him every year, and he'd devour in 2 days. I went out to buy the ingredients at the neighborhood market. Chocolate, eggs, flour, frosting. I spent almost everything I had left for the week, but I didn't care. It was my son's birthday, and even though things were strange between us, even though we hadn't really talked in weeks, I was still his father. And fathers celebrate their children, always. I spent the whole morning in the kitchen, mixing the batter by hand because I don't have an electric mixer, measuring the flour with a coffee mug because I don't have a scale, baking the cake in the old oven that heats unevenly. I had to watch it every 5 minutes so it wouldn't burn. While I waited for it to cook, I prepared the chocolate frosting, following the recipe Sarah had written down in a stained notebook. When I took the cake out of the oven, I let it cool and then decorated it with the frosting. I wrote "Happy Birthday, Danny" with white icing. It wasn't perfect. The letters were a little crooked, but I made it with love. That had to count for something. At 6:01 in the evening, I took the cake, put it in a cardboard box I got from the bakery, and headed for the house, his house. The house I had bought with 35 years of labor, the house I gave him so he would never have to suffer. I walked the 12 blocks with the cake in my hands, feeling my arms get tired, but I didn't care. I kept thinking about his face when he saw the cake, imagining his smile, his hug, his "thanks, old man, you shouldn't have." I thought that maybe this gesture would fix things between us a little, that we would sit together, eat cake, and talk like we used to. That even if it was just for a little while, I would be important in his life again. When I got to the house, I noticed something strange. There were cars parked all along the street. Lots of cars. A black BMW, a white SUV, a gray Mercedes, expensive cars that didn't belong in this neighborhood. I could hear music coming from inside, laughter, voices. I got closer to the door and saw there were balloons tied to the gate. Gold and black balloons, elegant, expensive decorations. My heart started beating faster. There was a party, a birthday party, and I wasn't invited. I rang the doorbell with a trembling hand, holding the cake with the other. I waited. The music kept playing inside. The voices kept laughing. I rang again, and finally the door opened. Danny appeared in the doorway. He was wearing an expensive white shirt, black dress pants, his hair styled with gel. He had a glass of wine in his hand. And when he saw me, his face changed. The smile vanished. His eyes went wide with something that wasn't joy. Was it panic? Shame? I don't know. But it wasn't happiness. "Dad," it came out like a whisper, like a curse. "What are you doing here?" It wasn't a question. It was a complaint. It was a, "You shouldn't be here." I held up the cake, smiling, trying to act natural. "I came to see you, son. I made you your favorite cake, the chocolate cake. Remember?" Danny looked at the cake. Then he looked at me. Then he glanced back inside the house as if calculating something. I looked past him too, and what I saw broke my soul. Madison was there in an elegant black dress, talking to a group of people. The in-laws were sitting on the couch I had helped him pick out when he moved in, drinking champagne. There were trays of expensive food, crystal glasses, soft music, everyone well-dressed, well-groomed, smelling of perfume. And there I was in my worn-out jeans, my plaid shirt, my old shoes, holding a homemade cake with crooked letters. A cake that suddenly seemed pathetic, ridiculous, poor. "Thanks, Dad," Danny said. And without waiting for an answer, he took the cake from my hands. He looked at it for a second, as if he didn't know what to do with it. And then he just left it on the porch floor. On the floor, like it was garbage, like it was something that needed to get out of sight fast. "But we're in the middle of something right now. I'll call you later, okay?" He took a step back, already closing the door. I just stood there, empty-handed, my mouth open, unable to say anything. "Danny, But before I could finish the sentence, he closed the door. He closed the door in my face, in the face of his father, who had just walked 12 blocks with a cake made with love. He closed the door and left me outside, alone on the porch of the house I had given him. I stood there, I don't know how long, staring at the closed door, listening to the laughter coming from inside, the music, the sound of clinking glasses, the cheers, and happy birthday that weren't for me. I looked down. The cake was still there on the floor in its cheap cardboard box. One corner of the box was crushed from the impact. I thought about grabbing it and taking it back, but I couldn't. I couldn't bend down to pick up that cake because if I did, I would have collapsed right there. So I turned around and started walking, slowly at first, then faster, and then I was almost running, my eyes burning, my throat tight, my hands empty. If you're listening to my story, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing there are people in the world who understand me gives me the strength to keep talking. I walked the 12 blocks back to my apartment with my head down, praying to God that no neighbor would see me like this. I didn't want anyone to ask me what happened. I didn't want to have to explain that my son had closed the door in my face, that he had left me outside his party like I was a salesman, that he had left my cake on the floor like it was nothing. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the couch without turning on the light. I just sat there in the dark, my hands shaking, trying to breathe. I didn't eat dinner that night. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't do anything. I just sat there in the dark, replaying that moment over and over. His face when he saw me, the panic in his eyes, the way he grabbed the cake and put it on the floor, the way he closed the door fast, as if he wanted to hide me, as if he was ashamed of me. And the worst part, the part that hurt the most, wasn't the closed door. It was realizing that there were 80 people inside celebrating my son. 80 people who were invited, who did deserve to be there. Co-workers, Madison's friends, the in-laws, the uncles, the cousins, everyone except me. Everyone except the man who raised him alone after his mother died. Everyone except the man who worked 35 years to give him the very house where he now shut the door in my face. That day, that Saturday in October, I understood something I had been denying for months. My son was ashamed of me. Of my workers' hands, my cheap clothes, my simple way of speaking, my simple life. I didn't fit into his new elegant life with his rich girlfriend's family and their champagne glasses and their soft music. I was a mistake from his past that had to be hidden. And he was hiding me, little by little, party by party, event by event, until the day he would erase me completely. And on that day, sitting on my couch in the dark, I felt something inside me harden. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something else. It was the seed of something I didn't recognize yet, but I knew it would soon start to grow. After the birthday, something in me broke, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no explosion, no uncontrollable crying. It was something quieter, more final. I started marking the days on the kitchen calendar, that old calendar the hardware store gives. Me every year with the moon phases and tide charts. Every day that passed without Danny calling me, I'd put a little red line with a marker. At first I thought it was silly, that it was something a bitter old man would do. But I needed to see it. I needed physical proof that I wasn't exaggerating, that my son's silence was real. The first week there were 2 red lines. The second week, 5. The third week, 7. And I kept marking. 12 days without a call. Then 18, then 23. The calendar filled up with red lines like a prison sentence. Like every passing day was another day I ceased to exist for him. I'd look at that calendar every morning while I drank my coffee, counting the lines, adding them up in my head. 31 days, an entire month without my son calling me, without him asking how I was, without him saying, "Hey, old man, how are you?" An entire month where, to him, I didn't exist. And the worst part is, I didn't call either because I was afraid. Afraid of bothering him. Afraid he'd tell me again that he was busy. Afraid of confirming what I already knew, that I was a burden to him. But it reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Wednesday, day 23, without hearing from him, and I needed to hear his voice, even if it was just for 2 minutes. I grabbed the phone, dialed the number I knew by heart, and waited. 1, 2, 3 rings. "Hello, Dad." His voice sounded hurried, as always. "Son, how are you?" It's been a long time since we talked. Silence on the other end, the sound of cars. He was on the street. "Yeah, Dad. Sorry, I've just been slammed with work. Do you need something? Do you need something?" As if the only reason I'd call is if I needed something. As if I couldn't just call because he was my son and I missed him. "No, son. I just wanted to know how you were." "Fine. Fine. Everything's fine. Listen, I'm about to walk into a meeting. I'll call you later, okay? I'll call you later." That phrase had become the most common lie of his life. But he never called. 4 more days passed. 5, 6. The red lines on the calendar kept piling up, and I kept waiting for that call that never came. I'd sit on the couch with the phone next to me, staring at it, waiting for it to ring, but it didn't ring. Or it would ring with telemarketers. "Mr. Sullivan, we'd like to offer you a new insurance plan." "No, thank you." I'd hang up and keep waiting like an idiot, like a pathetic old man with nothing better to do than wait for his son to remember he exists. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. It was during those days of waiting that I got sick. First it was a headache, then chills, then a fever. I took my temperature with the old thermometer Sarah kept in the medicine cabinet. I went to bed thinking it would pass with a couple of aspirins and a good night's sleep, but it didn't pass. The next day, the fever had climbed to 100 degrees Caspari. My whole body ached, my joints, my back, even my bones hurt. I got up to go to the bathroom and almost fell. My legs wouldn't respond right. My head was spinning. I got back in bed trembling, and there, alone, my body burning, my mind foggy with fever, I thought, I need help. I grabbed the phone with a shaky hand and called Danny. It was 11 in the morning on a Thursday. He was supposed to be at work, but I thought maybe if I told him I was sick, he would come see me. Maybe he'd bring me some food. Maybe he'd stay for a little while just to keep me company. The phone rang 6 times before he answered. Dad. His voice sounded impatient. I could hear voices in the background. Laughter. Son. My voice came out hoarse, weak. I don't feel well. I have a high fever. I'm here alone and, Dad, I can't right now. I'm at a work lunch, but son, I really feel awful. I don't know if, Dad, listen to me. Make yourself some tea. Get some rest. And if you still feel bad, go to the hospital. I can't go right now. I'll call you later, okay? And he hung up. I stayed there with the phone in my hand, staring at the black screen, unable to believe it. Make yourself some tea. That's what he told me. As if a cup of tea was going to cure me. As if I were a kid with a cold and not a 67-year-old man with a high fever living alone. I left the phone on the nightstand and lay back down. The fever kept rising. 103 degrees, 104 degrees off. I started to get delirious. I saw shadows on the ceiling. I heard voices. At one point, I swore Sarah was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, stroking my forehead like she used to when I was sick. It's okay, Walter. It's going to pass. But when I reached out my hand to touch her, there was no one there, just empty space. I spent 3 days like that. 3 days in bed alone, shaking with fever, only getting up to go to the bathroom and drink water. I didn't eat anything. I didn't have the strength to cook. I could barely make it to the kitchen, fill a glass of water, and go back to bed. The fridge had an expired yogurt and half a loaf of stale bread. Nothing else. My neighbors didn't know I was sick. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody asked about me. In those 3 days, I thought I was going to die there alone in that bed, and that nobody would find out until the smell alerted the neighbors days later. And the saddest part is, deep down, a part of me wasn't afraid of that. A part of me was already so tired that dying alone didn't seem so terrible. On the 4th day, the fever broke. I woke up soaked in sweat, but with a clearer head. I got up slowly, testing if my legs would hold me. I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. I was haggard, dark circles under my eyes, 10 years older than I was a week ago. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and the fear. I put on clean clothes. I made myself some tea and a piece of toast. And then, when I felt strong enough, I grabbed the phone and called Danny. I needed to tell him I had been sick. I needed him to know I had a terrible time, and he wasn't there. Maybe it wasn't to make him feel guilty. Maybe I just needed him to know. He answered on the 3rd ring. Dad. Danny, I was calling you a few days ago. I was sick, very sick. 3 days with a high fever. Alone, couldn't eat or, oh yeah. He cut me off as if I were telling him it had rained. That's great that you're better, Dad. Listen, I'm in the middle of something important right now. Can I call you later? There was no concern in his voice, no guilt, nothing. It was the voice of someone answering the phone just to be polite, but who was already thinking about hanging up. Danny, I had a really bad time. I thought, Dad, I have to go. We'll talk later. And he hung up. He didn't wait for me to finish my sentence. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't offer to come by. He didn't say anything. He just hung up. And I sat there on my couch with the phone in my hand and the cold tea on the table. I was his father, the man who raised him alone after his mother died, the man who worked 35 years so he could have a better life, the man who gave him a house. But to him, at that moment, I wasn't that anymore. I was an obstacle, an annoying obligation, an old man who called too much and demanded attention he no longer wanted to give. And the worst part is, he didn't know how to get me out of his life without looking like the bad guy. So he just erased me, little by little, call by call, silence by silence, until I just stopped existing. Until I was just a number in his contacts that rang every once in a while, and that he answered with annoyance. 2 months after I was sick, my neighbor Pat came to visit. She's 62, a widow like me. Every now and then she brings me some soup or we have coffee in my apartment. That day she came over with her phone in her hand and a smile. "Walter, do you use Instagram?" I shook my head. "I have the app because you put it on there, but I don't know how to use it." Pat sat down next to me. "Let me teach you. It's easy. You can see photos of your family, your friends. It's nice." She grabbed my phone and started explaining how to search for people, how to see photos, how to like them. I nodded, trying to understand, but deep down, I didn't see the point. Until Pat said, "Look up your son. That way, you can see what he's up to." When Pat left, I stayed there with the phone in my hand. Look up your son? The idea made me curious. It had been almost 2 months since I'd seen him, almost a month since we'd spoken for more than those 2 minutes when I called after being sick. Maybe on Instagram I could see what he was doing, how he was, who he was with. I opened the app, went to the search icon like Pat had taught me, and typed his name, Danny Sullivan. His profile popped up. His picture was of him smiling, wearing sunglasses on some beach I didn't recognize. I tapped his name to see more, and that's when I found something I didn't expect. This account is private. I couldn't see anything. Not the photos, nothing. My own son had a private profile, and I couldn't see his life. I felt like an idiot, like a spy. But my curiosity was stronger than my shame. I went back and created a new account. I didn't use my name. I put Gary Coleman, a random name. And for the profile picture, I uploaded an image of a landscape I found on the internet. Nothing that identified me. I searched for Danny again and sent him a friend request from that fake account. "Gary Coleman wants to follow you." I left the phone on the table and went to make dinner, feeling ridiculous. What was I doing? Spying on my own son? Creating fake accounts like a teenager? But I couldn't stop because I needed to know. I needed to see what was so important in his life that he had to forget about me. The next day I checked my phone. Danny had accepted my request. Gary Coleman now follows Danny Sullivan. My heart started beating fast. I went to his profile and now I could see everything. There were hundreds of photos. I started scrolling, looking at them one by one. Danny at a fancy restaurant toasting with Madison. Danny on a trip to the beach with her. Danny at his in-laws' house at a barbecue, laughing. Danny at a birthday party surrounded by people I didn't know. Photo after photo after photo of a life I didn't know, of a life I was not a part of. I kept scrolling, more dinners, more trips, more celebrations. I wasn't in any of the photos, not one. And then I saw them, the wedding photos. They were right there, posted 2 days ago. My finger froze on the screen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Danny in a suit, Madison in a white dress, an elegant hall, flowers, glasses, happy people. My son had gotten married. He had gotten married, and I knew nothing about it. I looked at the date of the post, 2 days ago. But in the description, it said, "The best day of our lives, November 14th. I did the math quickly. Today was the 16th. The wedding had been 3 days ago. No, wait, I read the comments. Beautiful wedding. Congratulations. And then I saw another comment that said, "The party yesterday was so beautiful. Yesterday. The party was yesterday. So the civil ceremony was 3 days ago, and the big party was yesterday." I froze, trying to process what I was seeing. My son had organized a wedding, a complete wedding. Civil ceremony, a reception, a hall, decorations, invitations, catering, a photographer. All of that takes months of planning, months of choosing the venue, tasting food, sending invitations, confirming guests. Months where he was busy preparing the most important day of his life. And at no point in all those months did it cross his mind to call me and say, "Dad, I'm getting married." Not even at the end. Not even the day before. Nothing. I found out 2 days later by spying on his Instagram with a fake account. That's what he had turned me into. A sad old man spying on his son because it was the only way to know what was happening in his life. I started reading the comments, looking for something, anything that would tell me I wasn't crazy, that it was normal to feel what I was feeling. There were hundreds of comments. What a beautiful couple. The most handsome bride and groom. What an incredible party. And then I saw one that drove a knife into my chest. It was from the father-in-law, the same guy I had seen in the birthday party photos, the one in the expensive gray suit. His comment said, "Welcome to the family, son. We are so proud of you, son." He called him son, and Danny had replied with a heart emoji. I scrolled down a little more and found another comment from the mother-in-law. Now you finally have a family that deserves you. We love you so much. A family that deserves you. As if I didn't deserve him. As if I hadn't been good enough. As if 35 years of raising him alone counted for nothing. I kept looking at the photos one by one, my hands shaking. I looked for any mention of me, any thanks to my dad who couldn't be here, any I dedicate this moment to my old man who always supported me. Anything. But there was nothing. I didn't exist at that wedding. I didn't exist in his life. It was as if I had died years ago and nobody had bothered to tell me. I zoomed in on the photos of the hall, looking for myself at a table in the back, thinking that maybe he had invited me and I'd forgotten to go. But no, I wasn't anywhere. I counted the tables. 8 tables, 10 people per table, 80 guests, 80 people who deserved to be there, 80 people who were more important than me, his father. I sat on the couch until it got dark. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't make dinner. I didn't do anything but look at those photos over and over, as if looking at them enough times would make me understand what happened. But there was nothing to understand. It was simple. My son had erased me from his life. He had replaced me. The in-laws were his new parents. Madison was his new family, and I was the embarrassing past that had to be hidden. The blue-collar father with the broken hands and cheap clothes who didn't fit into his elegant life. I felt something shatter inside my chest. It wasn't pain, not anymore. It was something else. It was clarity. It was finally understanding that I was never going to be good enough for him, that it didn't matter how much I gave him, how much I sacrificed, how much I loved him. It would never be enough. If you've ever been erased like that, if you know what it feels like to be excluded from the most important moments, subscribe to this channel. You are not alone in this pain. There are thousands of people who know what it's like to be invisible to someone who is supposed to love you. I left the phone on the table and just sat there in the dark, listening to the silence of my apartment. Cars passed by outside, a dog barked in the distance. Life went on, indifferent to my pain, and I, for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't want to keep begging for love. I didn't want to keep waiting for my son to remember I existed. I didn't want to keep feeling this constant humiliation of being ignored, excluded, erased. Something in me changed that night. Something hardened. Because it's one thing to be forgotten. It's another thing to be replaced. And that I was not going to forgive. 3 days passed without me calling Danny. 3 days of looking at the phone, picking it up, dialing the first few numbers, and then deleting them. 3 days of making excuses to myself. Maybe he didn't invite me because he thought I was still sick. Maybe he wanted something small and they'll do a family celebration later. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, but deep down, I already knew. I just needed to hear him say it. On the 4th day, I woke up at 5 a.m. in the morning with my heart racing. I had dreamed of Sarah. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, young like when we got married, and she was looking at me sadly. "Ask him," she was saying. "You need to ask him." At 11:20, I couldn't wait anymore. I dialed his number with a trembling finger. He answered on the 5th ring. "Dad." "Son, I need to talk to you." "Dad, I'm on my honeymoon. I can't talk right now." Honeymoon. The 2 words hit me like fists. "Son, I saw the pictures on Instagram, the pictures of your wedding." Silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence that confirmed everything I needed to know. "You got married?" I asked. "Yes," he finally said. 1 word. Dry. No explanation, no apology. "And why didn't you tell me?" "It was something intimate, Dad." "Intimate?" I repeated. "Danny, I saw the photos. I counted the tables. There were 80 people. There was a hall decorated with flowers. There was catering. There was a photographer. That's not intimate. That is a big party that you decided not to invite me to." "Dad, don't start," he finally said. "I have to go." "No," I said firmly. "Why didn't you invite me to your wedding?" "I'm your father, Danny. I raised you alone after your mom died. I worked 35 years to give you everything. I gave you a house and you get married and you don't even tell me. Why? Because I knew you'd do this," he said. "Complain, make me feel guilty, ruin everything with your drama." "A complication?" I repeated, unable to believe it. "Yes," he said. "Madison and her family, they're on another level, you understand? And I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I didn't want them to see you." So you hid me, I said. It's not like that, Dad. Yes, it is, Danny. You hid me as if I were something to be ashamed of. Dad, stop. It's done. It's over. I can't change the past. If you want to be angry, be angry. But I'm not going to keep talking about this. I have to go. And he hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and suddenly I understood something that chilled my blood. All that distance over the last 2 years wasn't because he was busy. It was because he was preparing the ground to erase me. It was a plan, a long, calculated plan to get rid of me without having to give explanations. I woke up one Tuesday at 6 in the morning with a mental clarity I hadn't had in months. I went to the bedroom closet and pulled out the small safe. Inside was the deed to the house in Maple Grove. I took it out with shaking hands. There it was. Owner, Walter Sullivan, my name, my signature, the date of purchase, March 12th, 2009. The house was still mine. It had always been mine. At 9 in the morning, I called Harold Patterson, my lawyer. Harold, I need to sell a property, today. By 3:15 in the afternoon, I had signed the papers, $85,000 in cash. The new owners take possession in 2 weeks. I walked to a park, sat on a bench, took my cell phone out of my pocket. Now came the hard part. I dialed Danny's number. Dad. Son, I need you to vacate the house in 15 days. What? What are you talking about? I sold it this morning. You did what? He was screaming. What did you do, Dad? The house was mine, Danny. It was in my name, and I decided to sell it. I signed the papers an hour ago. No, that can't be. That house is mine. No, son, that house was never yours. I gave you the keys. I told you it was yours, but I never legally transferred the deed. The title was always in my name. It was always mine, and now it belongs to someone else. Dad, you can't do this. Where am I going to live? What do I tell Madison? What do I tell her family? I don't know, son. I guess you'll have to find an apartment to rent. You'll have to live like I lived for 50 years. Maybe then you'll understand what I did for you when I gave you that house. But I can't afford rent right now. We just got married. Madison quit her job. We're on our honeymoon. Then cut the honeymoon short and come back to find a place to live. You have 2 weeks. Have a good trip, son. And I hung up. Now he was looking for me. 47 calls in 2 hours. But not because he loved me, because he needed something from me. People only look for you when they need something from you. Sometimes getting your dignity back cost you a house. It cost you relationships. It cost you family. But believe me when I tell you, it's worth every penny. Because living without dignity isn't living. It's surviving. That house is gone. My son is gone too, in a way. But I got myself back. I got back something I had lost years ago, respect for myself. And sitting in my armchair, drinking my coffee, looking out the window, I finally felt at peace. It wasn't the peace of having everything. It was the peace of knowing I would never again accept less than I deserve. And that is priceless.